voilà, donc je pense que c'est peut-être utile pour commencer ce séminaire d'avoir une introduction au concept de l'analyse économique et financière dans le cadre de projets d'investissement dans l'agriculture, le développement rural, la sécurité alimentaire et la nutrition. Donc un des défis en fait, de l'introduction de l'analyse financière et économique dans les plans d'investissement, c'est qu'on a pas mal d'outils pour faire cette analyse au niveau des projets, donc d'une échelle plus petite. Par contre, au niveau d'un plan national, je crois qu'il y a peu d'expérience. J'ai moi-même l'expérience d'avoir travaillé sur des plans d'investissement plus en Asie, au Bangladesh notamment. Le Bangladesh étant le premier pays en Asie à avoir fait ce plan d'investissement, un petit peu aussi inspiré par l'expérience du CADEP en Afrique. La première génération de plans d'investissement n'avait pas d'analyse financière économique. Comme vous, ils sont en train de travailler sur une deuxième génération de plans et ils n'ont toujours pas d'analyse financière économique. Et ils pensent introduire quelque chose peut-être l'an prochain. Donc c'est pour dire qu'on n'a pas vraiment d'expérience qu'on pourrait utiliser telle quelle. Donc je vais d'abord parler des outils qui sont en notre possession pour l'analyse financière économique de projets d'investissement. Et après, peut-être qu'on prendra, on passera quelques minutes à regarder le cas du Rwanda qui récemment a proposé un plan d'investissement et a introduit une analyse financière économique dans son plan d'investissement. Donc on regardera un petit peu comment ils ont fait et puis à la fin on se posera des questions comment ensemble, collectivement, on peut faire ce travail ou au moins l'initier dans les jours qui viennent. D'après ce que je comprends, le temps étant limité, on devra essayer d'aller le plus loin possible dans les jours qui viennent pour au moins se mettre d'accord sur comment faire et avec quels outils. Donc, alors, une première introduction simple à l'analyse financière économique. L'analyse financière économique, ce sont des graphes, ce sont des tableaux, ce sont d'autres graphes, ce sont des formules, et ce sont des choses qui, en fin de compte, nous paraissent très compliquées. C'est un peu une provocation. Je ne crois pas qu'on devra faire ça dans le cadre d'un plan national, mais c'est pour dire que il faut, ça c'est une devise que j'aime beaucoup, pourquoi faire simple quand on peut faire compliqué. C'est ce que j'expliquais tout à l'heure. Je crois que si un des buts de l'analyse financière c'est de convaincre, l'analyse financière économique ça doit être aussi un outil de communication pour essayer de convaincre du bien fondé d'un investissement. Donc, pour convaincre, il faut pouvoir parler aux décideurs dans les ministères des Finances, au niveau des partenaires, etc. Et donc avoir des choses qui soient suffisamment simples, suffisamment claires pour pouvoir prendre des décisions. Donc, avant de se plonger dans des grands calculs, je crois qu'il est bon de rappeler un petit peu les objectifs de l'analyse financière économique, pourquoi on l'a fait. Des concepts qu'on utilise, des concepts relativement simples qu'on utilise, de parler un petit peu de la différence entre analyse financière et analyse économique. Ensuite, de passer un petit peu de temps sur l'approche qu'on utilise dans le cadre des projets et des méthodologies qu'on utilise. Ensuite, il y aura une ou deux diapos sur les ressources qu'on a en termes de sites internet et de directives qui sont là. Enfin, ce que j'expliquais avant, on essaiera de voir un petit peu quels sont les défis qu'on a à adapter ces méthodes dans le cadre d'un plan national d'investissement agricole. Je voulais juste vous demander si je parle trop vite ou s'il y a des choses qui ne sont pas très claires, et si vous avez des questions aussi de me stopper, non? Il faut que ce soit un peu interactif, parce que sinon ça va être ennuyeux si je parle tout le temps. Et puis, donc, comme je disais, on prendra l'exemple du Rwanda. Donc, what are we doing here? Qu'est-ce qu'on fait ici? Donc, pourquoi est-on ici pour parler d'analyse financière et économique? Donc, je pense que les objectifs de la journée, s'il vous plaît, vous me pardonnez les fautes d'orthographe, parce que parfois il y a des anglicismes qui se sont un peu introduits. Donc, c'est se familiariser, démystifier l'analyse économique et financière, ou financière et économique de projets d'investissement. C'est d'essayer de comprendre leur méthodologie. C'est aussi tenir compte, parce que j'ai quand même noté un changement dans le nom de vos plans d'investissement, parce que vous parliez de plans d'investissement agriculture, et maintenant vous parlez de plans d'investissement agriculture, sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle. Donc il y a aussi besoin, je pense, dans cette analyse, de tenir compte des problèmes de sécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle, qui est, avec ma collègue Eglé et aussi Sophia, un des centres d'action de notre travail. Donc, comment, encore une fois, l'analyse financière économique peut s'appliquer au plan d'investissement. Et aussi, je voudrais aussi faire le lien entre cette analyse financière économique et le suivi-évaluation, qui me semble très important et qui, chez les économistes, de plus en plus, c'est quelque chose qu'on essaie de promouvoir en disant que l'analyse financière économique, c'est pas quelque chose comme ça isolé, mais c'est quelque chose qui doit être relié au suivi-évaluation des plans d'investissement. Voilà, et donc on regardera l'expérience du Rwanda et ensuite on s'accordera sur la manière de faire dans les jours suivants. Alors, les objectifs de l'analyse financière économique. Il faut savoir que ça remonte au sortir de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, où en fait on avait besoin d'investir dans la reconstruction, principalement en Europe, et des grands projets d'infrastructure, comme ici un barrage, pour essayer de montrer l'efficacité de l'utilisation des fonds publics. Donc c'était ça l'objectif au départ. Après, à partir des années 60, l'analyse coût-bénéfice est devenue un outil presque indispensable d'investissement, de pré-investissement dans tout ce qui est projet d'investissement, au départ des projets d'infrastructure, mais aussi pour les projets agricoles finalement. Donc ça a facilité la prise de décision. L'analyse financière et économique est utilisée pour comparer différents projets d'irrigation. Au départ, c'était pour dire si on veut un projet d'irrigation, on a un objectif. Si on a différentes options, on va calculer des indicateurs économiques. Comme ça, on va pouvoir comparer les différentes options. Donc c'était ça aussi l'objectif de départ. Maintenant, je pense qu'on s'accorde tous pour dire que l'objectif principal, c'est de s'assurer de l'allocation efficace des ressources, parce qu'on parle principalement d'investissement public. Donc on parle de ressources publiques qui viennent soit des ministères des Finances ou en partie des partenaires financiers et économiques. Et donc pour montrer qu'il vaut mieux investir plutôt que de ne rien faire. Donc on parle d'efficacité des ressources. Donc ici, il y a deux buts principaux. Donc là, pour simplifier ce graphique, il y a un côté qui est de dire on regarde l'efficacité, donc on va utiliser cette analyse financière économique pour faire des choix entre différentes options ou différents types d'investissements en disant celui-ci est plus rentable, celui-ci est moins rentable, et donc on va laisser tomber celui-ci et on va plutôt favoriser celui-là. Donc ça, c'est plutôt un appui à la décision. Et l'autre aspect, c'est d'essayer d'évaluer, de faire une évaluation ex ante de l'impact qu'on attend de cet investissement. Et cette évaluation devra être faite aussi, normalement, à la fin de l'investissement. Donc, qui a besoin de l'analyse financière économique? C'est un outil de prise de décision, mais décision par qui? Alors, au premier plan, ce sont les gouvernements qui investissent dans leur plan d'investissement, le ministère des Finances et aussi les ministères techniques, agriculture, etc. Il est aussi indispensable aujourd'hui, et c'est pour ça qu'a été aussi en partie créé le centre d'investissement de la FAO, pour toutes les institutions financières internationales, la Banque mondiale, le FIDA, la Banque africaine de développement, qui prêtent au pays et qui veulent aussi avoir une analyse financière économique. Donc le centre d'investissement dans lequel je travaille et aussi Eglé travaillait et aussi Sophia regorge d'économistes. Moi je pense parfois qu'il y en a trop, que je pense que la place de l'analyse financière économique est devenue un peu trop grande. Mais bon, ça c'est après on pourra en débattre. Et qui en a besoin? Je pense que la CEDEAO aussi a peut-être envie d'avoir ce genre d'indicateur. Donc voilà, la question qu'on se pose actuellement, c'est est-ce que c'est vraiment utile? Moi je pense que ça dépend en grande partie de la qualité, de la clarté. Si c'est une analyse un petit peu théorique, je pense que ça dépend, il faut baser l'analyse financière économique sur les données qu'on a. Les données, on ne les invente pas. Si on ne les a pas, il vaut mieux de rien faire plutôt que d'inventer des tas d'hypothèses et finalement d'avoir une analyse financière économique qui ne correspond à rien. Donc je pense qu'il vaut mieux avoir quelque chose de très simple basé sur des données fiables plutôt que de quelque chose de sophistiqué qui à ce moment-là pour moi n'est pas très utile. Donc le concept de base de l'analyse financière économique c'est la comparaison de scénarios. Scénarii, oui. Et principalement donc le scénario avec projet que l'on compare avec le scénario sans projet. Donc là, à droite, j'ai mis un petit peu une courbe un petit peu inventée par moi pour montrer ce qui se passe donc avec projet qui est la courbe verte, pour montrer qu'effectivement dans la première phase on investit beaucoup d'argent, donc les revenus sont plutôt en diminution. Puis après, à partir de quelques années, on voit la matérialisation des bénéfices. Et donc, la courbe verte dépasse la courbe noire. Mais ce qui est important ici de noter, c'est que la courbe noire n'est pas plate. C'est-à-dire que, normalement, quand on fait l'analyse financière économique, on essaie de faire une projection de ce qui se passerait sans intervention. C'est-à-dire ce qu'on appelle le business as usual. Mais ce qui ne veut pas dire que ça serait la même situation qu'aujourd'hui. Donc il faut une erreur assez fréquente, c'est de dire ce qui se passera dans le futur, c'est la même chose qu'aujourd'hui, si on ne fait pas de projet, ce qui n'est pas vrai, quoi. Donc il faut essayer de faire une projection de ce qui se passerait sans projet et la comparer avec une projection de ce qui se passerait avec projet. Donc on s'intéresse donc à l'augmentation, aussi bien des coûts et des bénéfices, donc on prend seulement la différence des coûts et des bénéfices avec et sans projet. En général, donc on a entendu tout à l'heure certains pays qui parlaient de la période d'investissement, qui en général est de 5 ans, mais j'ai entendu aussi parler de 7 ans. Et donc cette période d'investissement, c'est la période pendant laquelle les activités se font, mais la matérialisation des bénéfices interviendra aussi bien après l'investissement. Donc en général, on regarde les coûts sur la durée d'investissement 5 ou 7 ans, et les bénéfices, parfois sur 20 ans, parfois 25 ans, parfois jusqu'à 30 ans. Ça dépend un petit peu du type d'investissement. Donc il faut faire ces projections dans le futur aussi. Voilà, donc encore une fois, je fais un petit peu comment dire, un word of caution, comment dire, un petit peu de modestie de la part des économistes dont je fais partie. Ce sont des projections, donc ce sont des estimations, donc ce n'est pas vraiment une discipline scientifique. Ça, il faut le reconnaître et l'admettre. Donc, alors là, je vais passer la parole à ma collègue Eglé, qui va nous parler un petit peu des coûts, comment estimer les coûts. D'après ce que j'ai compris, il y a certains pays qui sont déjà bien avancés, donc ça va peut-être leur paraître moins utile, mais d'autres peut-être qui ont besoin de ce genre de conseils.
Saying I understand that many of you have already done the costing exercise. So for those few countries that still have to do this exercise, maybe you can also serve as a resource for your colleagues who have to do this in the next few days. So, of course, to be able to do the financial and economic analysis, you need to do the costing, otherwise you cannot do the financial. And the key principles to prepare the costing is to understand why the costing is important. It's mainly because it's a communication tool. It's very important so the government and the decision makers can make the right decisions. Also, it is important to understand where we have gaps, where we don't have enough resources so to attract external funding and to provide the resources necessary to cover the plan. And also, at the end, whatever is costed and enter into this plan will lead to policy, to changes in the policy and in the decisions of the government. And it's also a tool to monitor, because you initially plan the planning of the activities, and then once you implement, you can see where you stand, if you have underestimated, overestimated your plans. The first important thing to do is to understand, to envisage, to plan the investments and the recurring cost. So I think you have all done your strategic framework for your plan, for your NAIP. And so according to the theory of change of the NAIP, so you will have the first objectives, the programs, and then you will have maybe sub-programs, and within those you will have the outcome, what you will achieve in the long term, and then the outputs, what you will achieve in the short term. And within the output, then when you go into the project phase, you will then detail all the activities that you will need to achieve those outputs, and with those outputs to achieve the outcome, and with those to achieve the main objective of the plan, of the NAIPs. To tell you, one important thing to know is to know the difference between the investment and the recurring costs. So the investments are assets, so that could be work, goods, services that are acquired at the present, but at the present stage, but they will generate benefits in the future. And they can be both.
Et ça peut être des actifs tangibles, les équipements.
Also be intangible, like capacity development, technical assistance, and they're different from the recurring costs, because the recurring costs are those costs that you face to have your investment functioning, like for example labor, for example gasoline, electricity to run a navigation system. The good thing is that for the NAIPs, it's not so important to be very detailed. You really have to have a very broad indicative figure. Then when you go to the project phase, when the NAIP is validated and you go to implementation phase, then it will be necessary to go more into the details. I don't know whether you have used CostHub to do your costing. I don't know. It's a quite useful tool. There are other tools that I will talk about you in the next days, mainly when you go more in the implementation phase. But then we can see how those who have to do the costing need to do this in the next days. I can assist. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll talk after the cost benefits. So I think, and as
que certains pays d'Asie ont eu d'essayer de développer
the main objective, the goals and objectives of the project, right? We talk. No. No. Les objectifs doivent être.
The goals should be connected to the benefits to really reflect the goal of the project. The objectives at different level, from the top to the lowest level. Hence, the connection with the outcomes and output of the project. So, for me, there's the definition of the goals expected from the implementation of NAIP is one of the important part of the economic and financial analysis. So I mean that even if it is qualitative, the fact of clarifying what are the benefits that we expect, this obliges us to clarify them, to specify them, and to describe their nature and to materialize the result framework for NIPE. This also obliges those who are in charge of developing the project or the NIPE to allocate or to assign to this result some target, specific targets, by saying that we expect that in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, we increase the production for a given number of farmers. This obliges to do this work of risk assumption. This is not scientific work. I know that there are colleagues of IFPRI here, but this is a collective work of collective reflection on what we can expect from the implementation of investment. So, for example, this obliges us to go further than the fact of saying that following the implementation of the NIPE, we will have an increase of agricultural lead or GDP by 6%. We need to go further by saying that we expect the production of so and so food should increase by so and so percent in so and so region. The financial economic analysis is a tool, materialization tool for operationalizing the strategic framework of the outcome framework of NIPE. So for me, it is really the heart of NIPE. It is about saying clearly the results, the advantages, but also what we call the beneficiaries. I don't like that name, but those who participate in the project, whether they are farmers or other entrepreneurs. So we distinguish three types of benefits. We have benefits quantified and monetized. So benefit for which we can really assign quantities, and those quantities we really will easily assign to them a value, an economic value, monetary value, or dollar value, depending on the currency. These are currency values. We also have quantified values which are difficult to monetize. So these benefits are real benefits. So we can estimate the quantity, but we have challenge in assigning the value. So, but they are easy to describe. There are finally benefits that are not quantifiable, which are intangible, which are real, but which cannot be. We cannot assign any quantity thereof. So, in order to illustrate what I was talking about, as part of the investment project in agriculture or rural development and food security. So the first category of benefit, on the left, this is an increase of yield and agricultural production, the revenue. So this is the revenue of households, the value of agricultural product, food products that were processed along the value chain. Also, we also have the revenue, macroeconomic revenues, particularly the increase of the GDP, the trade, the taxes, import of products. We also have a very important aspect, which is the loss of the decrease or drop of lost of, so we can quantify that. And also we have benefit of these plans, which is the drop of the price of some commodities, nutritional commodities, so that can facilitate their consumption. So these are monetary benefits. Well, benefits that are quantified and which are non-monetary benefits. The borderline is not clear because there are some brilliant economists that tries to assign a value in CFA or dollar on many things. So the borderline between both is not too clear. Rural poverty, if we say, for example, that we believe that following the implementation of the NIPE, we will decrease rural poverty by 150,000 households. Well, so this is enough So no need to assign a value in terms of CFA. So nutritional benefit, this is subject to controversy with my colleague Sophia and other colleagues. I believe that it is useful as part of financial analysis, but because we are talking about foods and nutritional security, so you need to show some nutritional advantages, particularly in terms of diversity of production and consumption. So availability in protein, availability in terms of food product with nutritional values, specific nutritional values. So another advantage is, which is very key, so is carbon sequestration. They can contribute to the drop of climate change. Then there too, some analysis assigned applies to carbon. We can also, but I believe the main argument, if we talk about decrease of production by 7 million tons of carbon, so this related to job creation. So this is very important. We can try to quantify it without putting a dollar value. Reduction of mortality has no cost. So we can also include it in this category, the schooling level of children, and there are non-quantifiable benefits which are real. When we talk about capacity of women empowerment, social capital, strengthening of social farmers association. We talked about conservation of biodiversity, health of families. When we also talked about contribution to the equity, peace, for some investment, and once again, strengthening of institutions. So an important work, particularly in the weeks ahead. So we'll try to start that tomorrow. We should try to clarify this kind of benefits which are expected of the implementation, following the implementation of NIPES. So now, a reminder, once we have the cost and benefits, we'll now do what we call cost-benefit analysis. This is, sorry for misspellings. The idea is to say, that the benefit that we are going to achieve in the 20 years ahead exceed the investment cost. So when we conduct a cost-benefit analysis, when we have enough confidence on the fact that we have enough element to quantify and monetize most of the cost and benefit of the project. So we consider in general that this is a goal of the economic analysis, but sometimes we don't go there till this point, and we do what we call cost-effectiveness analysis. When some benefits are expected, we fail to assign a value, monetary value on that. We consider them as the main objectives, and we try to assess how to achieve them at a less cost. So in the financial economic analysis, we have these two types of analysis. First of all, we believe, we calculate the yield rate or profitability rate. When we talk about food and nutritional security, if the end goal is to improve the nutrition and health of the people, no need to assign a value in terms of dollar, but however, we try to see how much it will cost to achieve such objectives. So just to visualize a bit the cost and benefit, can I show with this, or can I use this to show it? Yeah. So here, the first 5 years, so we have the investment period. Here in blue, sea blue, you have the investment cost which increase, and they decrease, and after they break even. So now the second cost element that Egle was mentioning, that we should not neglect, because it will be a mistake to say that investment will yield recurring cost, which are in blue and light blue here, and which really go by increasing. And the third element, which the benefit, which so how do they materialize modestly during the third year, and after that they increase and they come to a peak after 10 years, for example. So you need to be realistic and not to consider that the benefit will automatically come after 1 or 2 years. So this will require no long-term investment in general. Now we will make the difference between the analysis, financial analysis and the economic analysis. They are represented here, a farmer, and here, well, the 15 countries in West Africa. The financial analysis is a micro-analysis. I mean, it concerns the individual actors, stakeholders individually. We talk about agriculture, so we speak about a farmer and farms, but also micro-entrepreneurs. We can also talk about companies that are small and medium enterprises or large enterprises. So we consider financial profitability, real financial profitability, which will come at the level of the public actors, and then we use for that the market prices. As part of NIPE, it will be important to have a few examples as illustration. Not necessarily, we not need to consider all the stakeholders and do an analysis for all of them, but we need to select maybe some of them in order to illustrate what we envision to intervene at the level of the private actors. So, in terms of economic analysis, this is happens at country level, and this is countrywide. So we move from the financial analysis and try to aggregate the different benefits and different costs that will intervene at the level of the various players, and we aggregate all this in the investment plan level. And so we try to calculate criteria, profitability criteria countrywide. At this level, we can complement the analysis in monetary terms with considerations that are much more, a bit more, that encompasses health, food, nutrition, impact on environment, carbon sequestration, and so on and so forth. It is at the level of the economic analysis that we do such, we include such aspects. So we are going to talk about, first of all, about, maybe if you have any question, stop me. So we'll start with the financial analysis. The objective of, yeah, go ahead. One of your slides shows the benefits. Well, is there any difference between benefit and return on investment? Well, the return on investment, we're going to see that later on, about the return on investment. In fact, it means once we have quantified the benefit, we need to see if they will exceed the cost or not. So the return on investment will be a concept to try to assess the profitability of the investment by comparing the cost and the benefits. But the return on investment is a concept, a broad concept, but here we're going to see 2 or 3 indicators that indicate, the return on investment. But we should use the benefit, but also the return on investment. For the financial analysis, you said that we can do, a sample. We can take a sample of players on which this financial analysis will apply. I'd like to know after, should we extend it, should we generalize it, or we should limit ourselves to this sample only? Oh, this is a good question. I believe that we need to, we don't have the means to do models. We don't have the means to do models for all the players, so we need to, I'd like to make choices by saying that we try to assess the financial analysis on type of farmers in this region and another type of farmers on this region, on entrepreneurs that will process. Also, we have the sample that do not represent every player, all the players. For the economic analysis, we need to aggregate all this and conduct some shortcuts. So we need to make shortcuts and generalize by saying that based on this sample, we'll aggregate and we assume that for all the players, well, this will produce, well, so and so as advantage. So with your permission, I would like us to discuss. If you have any questions on the presentation, so I would like us to discuss because we have wiped away the concept of costings, general elements, broad elements on the analysis. If there are any questions, maybe we'll clear that and then discuss them before tackling financial and economic analysis. If you so agree. So, with your permission, I have a question. When we conduct the costing of NIPES, just before the costing, there is a step which is deepening in the process. So we have in English call it scoping and targeting. The scoping of interventions and the targeting of beneficiaries. This is a key step about which allows to generate cost. Costs that are close to the reality, and oftentimes, because this is different from indicators, it is dimensioned interventions. This is a key because this allows to generate later on cost of the major component. And if this exercise is not done, oftentimes we move fast on this exercise, and sometimes this creates small distortions in the budget generated. I take an example. Concrete example. Oftentimes, we want to do some agricultural development in the NIPES for a farm, rice production, or want to develop road or oftentimes 1,000 or 2,000 hectares developed. When we, as part of costing, in general, these are data that exist in directorates and the ministries, or the sub-data might exist in the Ministry of Economic Infrastructure. So they know the price of tarred road kilometer, or secondary road development, and such elements. When we not calculate them appropriately in the budget, this will increase the cost of NIPE, because depending on the country, it might be $30,000 or $45,000 per kilometers of non-tarred road, including bridges in rural areas. But the reality is that in general, when we express them in terms of cost, they are voluminous. But if we reduce in terms of time, then we reduce the cost, because for a road, a secondary road, we need a study to define the route. After that, we need a feasibility study to estimate the cost, and we need to adjudicate the contract. We need to select the entrepreneurs, and we need to control the entrepreneur. For a rural road, a secondary road, it is difficult to plan, to do 1,000 kilometers per annum. Oftentimes, well, this is just because the operational capacity to deliver these roads takes time. And even if the capacity is established, it is developed progressively. So what I'm trying to explain is that after the cost, if we compare this to the operational capacity, it allows to size appropriately some activities and come up with costs. Because if costs are important, if you make the economic and financial analysis, this will affect the profitability of the project. So we should not forget the fact that we need to focus on the dimensioning and targeting before generating the costing. And if there is a costing, we need to ask, the costing specialist to give you element of cost, dimensioning matrix there. So behind that, there are many elements for the costing, so we can identify budget cases and not to use targeting. That's the idea, because it will allow you to determine the benefits. This applies for to increase the production. It is the same approach that we need to use, and the agricultural farms. Well, I have an objection in this regard, if I understand. If I've followed well the presentation. So we are still presenting the concept. We followed the first part, well, as said to be corrected by him. We are now viewing the details. We are now on the decision between financial analysis and economic analysis. But we are still dealing with the presentation of concept. And I believe that the discussion that you are raising is interesting, but it is after. It is when we will really, we will be on the consideration of budget and programs in the budget that it is relevant. So I prefer, as instead of opening this discussion now, we'll leave the presentation, so continue, and after that we'll come back on the important question that you raise. Yes and no. Later on, I'm not going to come back on the cost because I'll talk about the benefit, and I'll talk about the calculation and a way to organize that in terms of cost and benefits. So what Stefan is mentioning is very important. For my experience in Bangladesh, well, one of the main element of the cost is the prioritized interventions, particularly development partners, where setting pressure on the government by saying that you cannot spend all this money, you can never implement this. What you are asked to do, you are asked to do is to assign priorities in your investment. Well, so the financial and economic analysis is a tool for prioritizing. But when you do the cost, we need to take into account the fact that it will cover 5 years or 7 years, and there are some limiting absorption capacities. So hence the need to prioritize cost. So I'm not going to come back on that. So it is important to underscore it now. But once again, I don't know. In the group works, the breakout sessions, we will see how the countries have made this scoping, this prioritization of activities, but I think that this is a very important element. Thank you. I have a small worry concerning the financial and economic analysis about the presentation mentioned. He mentioned project, but he did not mention the cases of programs. I'd like to know if the economic and financial analysis is not, how do you call it? If this analysis is not conclusive, it means that should we set the program aside? I'm talking about financial and economic analysis of a program, because it is a decision-making tool. So if through the program we notice that this financial and economic analysis is not conclusive, does it mean that we will forget about the program? Also, we know that the process takes time, and if finally we have a costing and we connect the financial analysis and we say, no, financially and economically this project is not good, this program is not good. Should we leave it, or what do we do? Second question, in terms of financial economic analysis, you said that we need to take into account the market cost. Considering that the price is dynamic, I would like to know, so how do we behave then? These two questions are interesting. The first one is your first question. It is a question, an issue of ethics for economists. Sometimes the economists is like in the present case, this analysis comes at the end of the process. So it is difficult to say that there are plans that were validated and to say that, well, some part of this plan are not profitable and then we need to keep them aside. But unfortunately, I think that oftentimes the financial economic analysis is used to justify ex post decisions that were made already. This is why I was saying that if it is, such is the case, if it is just to justify and reassure everyone artificially, I don't think it is useful. If it is a decision-making tool, I think it is useful. So I'm talking to you based on my personal experience, where I worked on the economic and financial analysis of a very large investment program in Kazakhstan. So they have about 15 networks, irrigation network that they wanted to repair, and over 50% of them were not profitable. And the recommendation that we made to the government was to say, no, don't invest in these irrigation networks if the only criterion is the economic criterion. And this is where we can discuss at this level, because the government can say, when particularly in Kazakhstan, they may say we have other criterion other than the economic criterion. We may have a social criterion by saying that we want to maintain the population on these irrigation networks for ethics, social reasons. At that time, we can say, well, from an economic standpoint, it is not profitable, but for political or social reasons, okay, we can say that we maintain this investment. Okay, so this is where the economic analysis is ambiguous. So if the goal is to justify, at all costs, the decision that were made already, well, this is useless. But if it is for decision-making tool, it can be also investment, profitability rate of 15%. We'll explain it later. If we have a 15% rate and 30% rate, well, we need to invest or to do scoping in this direction, so it can be a decision-making tool during the implementation. And I say that we will prioritize some projects. The second question was the market cost, market price. It is true that this is a difficulty. It is difficult to envision the future. When we do a financial analysis, we use the market price as at the day where the analysis is conducted, or if we know that the price will change next year or in 2 years' time, if we have a good projection or forecast of the price at the time of implementation of the project, we can use this price. But sometimes it is a challenge. Generally, we use the price of the market price at the time of the analysis. Other comments? Use your mic, sir. Chair, use your mic.
Bien sûr. Donc on va peut-être.
So now we are going to move to we go further, and we'll go further in the method of financial and economic analysis, and we are going to start with from the financial analysis. The objective is to assess the financial effect on the main stakeholders in the project and projects. And so first of all, the farmers and some entrepreneurs, some implementing bodies and some activities, the government itself, and so on and so forth. So the goal is to make sure that the activities promoted by the project are attractive for the various players. For example, if one of the projects or the programs, the most important in the investment project is to try to disseminate or to extend some techniques or some varieties, there's a need to be sure that at the level of the farm, the benefit will exceed the cost. need to make sure that ensure the capacity of players. If you take farmers, for example, the capacity to cover the current cost. I mean, it is not enough to say that this is a good crop, but you need to show that in the future, if a person has adopted, if the farm has adopted this production technique, or if this activity is implemented, farmers can maintain the investment in the future, or they can refund their loan if there's the need to another loan to do this exercise, to carry out this exercise. So the interest is to show, if need be, in order to promote these activities, if some grants are needed, or if it is so profitable that some part of the benefit can be taxed. So it is also used to set some tariffs. So and I don't know what is approach at the level of the PNASAN, but some FNS, but the government can have recourse to some cost recovery coming from the beneficiaries. And it is the financial analysis at the level of the players that will demonstrate if there is a refund capacity. When mentioning the example of Kazakhstan, this is an important element. I mean, the government of Kazakhstan wanted to recover half of the rehabilitation cost, and we showed that through our models in the farms that it was not possible at all. That this provoked some benefit, but this benefit were not enough to refund the investment cost for irrigation projects. Well, the steps used for in some activities is to, if we take agricultural investment, these are farm models, which are based on activities, representative activities that what we try to promote in investment plan. For example, if the development of a sloping basin or an irrigation network, what will be the consequence in the representational farm. So to consider a model of farm which will take the recording cost, investment cost, and the benefit after 1, 2, or 4 years. So and we compare the cost and benefits with and without project. So it is relatively, it should be, for me, we should try to maintain this models, maintain them as simple as possible for people to understand it, because economists like to complicate models so much so that nobody understands apart from them. And this is not a goal, because again, this is a communication tool, farm model. So these are based on cropping budget. So we have, you can see a model later on, rice production with input, the yield, the market price, and at the time where the analysis is conducted, and with or without project, the yield are increasing by so and so, and a financial benefit increasing by so and so. So this allows to determine the additional revenues at the level of each crop, and try to aggregate this at the farm level by saying that there's a typical farm. Once again, we need to streamline it, because it will be very complicated on a farm, including too many crops. Generally, we take the two main production crops in the farm, and we improve the revenues. So we calculate the profitability, financial profitability indicators, which are threefold. And then we have what we call the current net worth, net present value. I'll explain what this means later. The profitability, internal profitability yield, and the cost-benefit ratio. And so we evaluate the financial revenues and the funding needs and the loans on the farm. So we do that for agricultural producers, and And we also mentioned investment in the value chains, and not only at the level of the agricultural production, but along the food system and processing along the processing chain. And then we also introduced in general in the financial analysis some analysis of typical enterprise, and we tried to do an evaluation of cost benefits with our project, and generally these benefits are connected to the value addition through processing, through marketing, through transportation. And this is also economic value which is generated by the investment plan. It is therefore useful to show the impact, financial impact thereof, in order to aggregate in terms of GDP. And so this enables to determine the additional revenue. And also there, we use oftentimes the same criteria, profitability criteria, the net value and the profitability rate, and the cost and benefit ratio. So this allows to see the reimbursement capacity of enterprises. What I was mentioning before was that I also believe that, this might be an innovation, but if we talk about the investment plan for agriculture with the goal of improving food security and nutritional security, it is good to introduce some elements, sometimes quantitative and qualitative elements too, in the financial analysis. Some element related to food security and nutrition. I believe that it is good to, there's a part of these elements which are qualitative in nature, and economic and financial analysis is not only quantitative, it is a communication tool. So the goal is to convince. If we properly describe the kind of products, additional products that are generated by the implementation of the product, product with a strong nutritional value, if we manage to describe them in terms of diversity and production, and showing the contribution thereof to the diversity, if we compare this with the needs and the deficit or nutritional deficit in countries, will show that it can bridge some gap in terms of nutrition by using the nutritional component of food. So we need to do net projections in terms of consumption. If there is a product production, part of the production will be sold, but some part of it will be eaten. So, but we cannot. So we need to show the impact at the level of the consumption by the households, and the fact of seeing simply the revenue of households from the poverty level to food security. Then we have the chances of promoting food security in the families. It is also important to this financial economic analysis is important for targeting populations that are facing food and nutritional insecurity. If we can prove that part of the activities are targeted among such people that are facing this situation, it is a good argument for the implementation of the NIPE. Though the women empowerment is also one aspect, a key aspect in the financial analysis, we should highlight it. It is useful to show what is the role of men and women, and show the impact that it can have on the women in terms of revenue, but also in terms of workload. It is very important. And finally, we can also show that if we want the interventions, production and processing intervention to have an impact on consumption, maybe we need to introduce some additional activities in the investment plan that connect to nutritional education. So here I showed, if you can read, but I included an example of financial analysis, financial and economic analysis, and an outcome, a result of this analysis, economic and financial analysis, and this is in South Sudan, and I believe that this is it is useful to show the clear summary thereof that shows here the yield, consumption of households, the post-harvest loss, the quantity sold, the revenues from this such sale, and the additional benefit due to the project interventions. And here we show on the left what is happening here, the situation with that project, and here we show what will happen with a new technology which is promoted by the project. If such technology is adopted by 25% of the people, 75% of people, and 50% of the people, and we have an evaluation of the increase of benefit here. Once again, we need to take into account, don't forget in such analysis, the cost, operation costs, which here do not show, well, a very big change, but we should note that when there are investment and new technologies, it can have an impact on the increase of recurrent cost. Here, this is an analysis of financial analysis at the level of the small irrigation networks. So, and because it is also one element of the financial analysis sometimes. We did that at the level of the farm, but it can be done at the level of an irrigation network to find out if it is profitable to invest in this irrigation network. Well, in all in law, we show the production, the revenue from this production, the production cost. So, I mean, the beneficiary margin, and in terms of labor, we make the decision between the labor of the family, and generally we do not assign any value in the financial analysis, and also there is a labor which should be paid, labor to be paid, and so we calculate the margin, the net margin without the project and with the project, and we show any difference in terms of percent, in absolute terms. So that is the interest of this kind of table, which recaps what was done to show that here we have an increase of the margin by 50%. So this is an attractive intervention. An attractive intervention. However, what is interesting here is that this analysis also enables to know to what extent we can also retrieve part of the investment costs in this irrigation network as in the form of irrigation fee, as annual contribution to the running of the irrigation network. Once we retrieve this cost from the users water, the increase is only 30% instead of 50%. So there is such analysis that can be conducted. So, this is for the financial analysis. Question. You mean the previous slide? Thank you. You just said something on the how you process, you deal with the family labor or the household labor. So if I got you right, you said that in general we are not going to assign a cost for that. Well, this is controversial, you know. And secondly, second aspect that I would like to address is that in the part related to revenue, what do we do about family household levies? Because our agriculture is dominated by small holders. So the labor, the workforce in the family is very important, and the levies are also important. So how should we deal with these two elements to be sure that we conduct a financial analysis which is comparable? So I'm going to try to answer because I know that there are various schools. I don't know if mine is the preferred one. Well, the approach that we have at the level of the investment center of FAO is to say that in terms of financial analysis in the household, because we are talking about cost and real benefits, in the financial analysis we do not, we do not take into account the workforce, family or in the family. Well, for the financial economic analysis, the labor has a cost, and we should assign a value to it. But if we assign a cost of 0 in the financial analysis, what we do is the return on the labor. So we're going to try to calculate the net benefit that the family, the household will deploy by day of work. So, but if we do the financial economic analysis, there's no financial cost. Also, it counts 0. But for the economic analysis, we'll introduce this cost, and this can really decrease the profitability because it can have an important impact. Now, your second question was the levies. So what we do is that we assign the price of the farm gate. We assign a value, the market value. So because the alternative will be to use to buy on the market, but so we assign a value, a financial value. At the level of the monetary analysis, this is what we do. But now I was explaining is that it was interesting that we have an important part which is which is consumed. What is important is to show if we have any problem of terms of food security, to show that this improves. This is an advantage for the in terms of food security and nutritional security. It is important to show that in the model. In your document, to conduct a financial analysis, you said that we need to move from the farm model. So is it about operational model, or because can you explain the difference? Because the farm model, I don't know. Is it, maybe I can understand it in another context, but in our context, it is true that you can understand it, but I believe that sometimes we use with a model of operational cost or results cost per group of crops. This has a connection with our context. As the man said, we are in smallholder farms. So in our continent. So here, your model of farm, does it mean operational accounts or operational results? Oh, that is difficult. So this is not an accounting analysis. Maybe I'm mistaken. Well, the farm model is a streamlined analysis of a smallholder farm. So we have a farm, and then keeping the books is complex. In such analysis, as we base ourselves on assessment or evaluation, external evaluation, we streamline it by doing farm models. So it is less complicated than an accounting model, so accountancy model. So that would be my answer. Our ambition is not to keep the books, because in general we don't have the means. Well, this is a challenge that generally we don't have much time to do that. So we streamline things. This is why we talked about farm models instead of agricultural accountancy model. Practically in our investment plans, we have programs and we have activities. No, we have sub-programs and we have projects. We might have about 40 or 50 projects. So how will it happen? Concretely, are we going to conduct economic and financial analysis by programs? And we have the global profitability. This is what we use during the first generation NIPES. But how will it be done concretely now? So did you have the same question? So I intended to address that question later on, but it is true that it will be a challenge because, once again, we don't have much time, and we'll therefore need to adjust to the data because we cannot invent all the data. So we'll address that later on, but it is true. Yeah, that's the challenge. The exact goal of this seminar, one of the goals of this seminar is to know how to come about that. Thank you. Well, I would like to come back on the steps regarding the financial analysis. You said that we need to identify standard enterprises and with the scenarios with project and without project. Now, in relation to the situation without project, so this is a baseline, if I understand, the baseline situation. So we take two projects, one receiving a support and another one receiving no support. And then we wait for the 5 years of the end of the project and to go and evaluate, to have a baseline situation and compare. Did I get you right? Yeah. Once again, these are forecast. So we do the scenario, so we forecast in the 5 years ahead and the 10 years ahead what will happen in the absence of any project, and we compare with the situation where the project is implemented. Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean. So how do we evaluate? How do we project this situation without project? Considering that our logic is that if it is a situation without project, that enterprise without project, according to us, might receive other projects as well. Something like that. So how do we come about that? Well, two things. Well, if it is a new enterprise, well, I would say without project, so it is nothing. So if it is a business being set up, so just forecast the business model, what the enterprise will do, and then we identify the benefit. But where we talked about without project, we are talking about the farms. So the farms are there, they will develop. Some of them, there will, in some regions there is a development underway, and when without any external intervention, the revenues will be increased by 10%, or, well, in other region, due to climate change, if it is considered that if the situation remained unchanged, if there is no intervention, the situation will be degraded or downgrade. But for an enterprise, this is different. If another project comes, well, we cannot consider it. We cannot take it to account. We will try to guess how our situation will be if in the absence of any intervention. But if there are other interventions, we cannot foretell. I'm not totally satisfied, but we can forge ahead. Your mic. Use your mic, sir. Use your mic, sir. Well, I wanted to... I wanted to come back on the issue of streamlined operational accounts. In general, in NIPES, we have priority crops that are identified on which we will focus the actions. And so these are our priority crops. For such crops, priority crops, we can have a simplified operational account. So we have we know the situation of a baseline the baseline for these farms. We know the average production, we know the average benefits that exist. This is our baseline model. So, and when we want to analyze what will have take place with the project, it is all the additional inputs that will impact this standard farm. What effect this is likely to generate in terms of benefit for this situation. So, with such model, we do simulations of variations on that, and we generate this element per aggregation. We generate what we want to achieve in relation to the targets. This allows us to identify elements, and these models are the base of the calculation for our priority crops, where the main elements should be specific enough. After that, Faber RB. Well, I have a small worry with, in fact, with the standpoint on which we have addressed the financial analysis. We are laying more focus on projects, more emphasis on the project, or on forms of projects which are more profit-making projects. We know that in our NAPs, we are dealing with development projects, and the angle where we took to analyze the two projects are different, because in the development projects, the situation varies. I feel the question of the others, because it is connected to that. When we take the profit-making project, if we are a company, for example, the goal is to make profit, or to make profit for the shareholders. That situation is different from a development project put in place by the state. So in the first case, we can go until the operational account, operating account. In the development project, we can also produce operating accounts. But one of the constraints is that some aspect cannot be quantified and cannot be monetized. We cannot have the monetary value of some aspects to include them in the operating account. So, therefore...
Just pour donc ces projets. Maintenant, je crois que...
can we include them in the profit analysis account? The different development projects are different from farms, because in the NAPS FNS, we are asked to put in place 150 farms. The model will not be the same if we compare this to somebody who wants to sell abroad. The actions to be conducted by the government differs from the actions to be implemented by an entrepreneur. So how to quantify, how to evaluate the profitability? So I said that, according to me, I thought that we will lay more emphasis on the economic analysis, economic profitability, which is much more, according to me, in adequacy with the development objectives, more than the financial analysis, which is rather for profit-making projects. So it is, the worry, the concern that I had before we really continue this workshop. Thank you. I'm going to talk about economic analysis in the second part of the presentation, but I think that a development project, can try to develop revenues or health or food security for people who we work for. So it is our duty to have analysis at the level of these people. What will be the impact among these people? This is the goal of the financial analysis. I'm not I'm not a supporter of a developed financial analysis. This is not necessary, but we need to ask ourselves the question, if such an investment program exists on the behalf of the government, what will be the impact on the families? We should do that. Some people believe that the financial analysis is most important. and some think that it is rather the economic analysis. But I believe that both are important, and we should not only take into account the monetary aspect, because we have other aspects that we expect from the development project. This is why I believe that we need to introduce some nutritional dimension. As we are in a situation where it is several projects that will be put together to create the impact that we want to show, and therefore the sampling that will allow us to measure this impact, it is very important. So this is the basic question that the representative of Togo is talking about. If there's any methodology that will allow us to do this sampling that will produce results that are statistically justifiable. So during this training process, we need to get there, because we know in order to analyze the impact of a project, we know the methodology used. Here, we have an ethics issue where we want to put in place a project that will affect almost all the farms. In this case, how should we sample in order to follow up and analyze that it is really the impact that will be created by the project in financial and economic terms? I will give the floor to Sheriff, but please see his presentation from the onset. He told you from the onset of his presentation the approach, analysis, economic and financial approach. Well, anyway, the experience was on project. So he's explaining to you how we do that on project. He said, toward the end of our deliberations, we'll see, based on the experience of everyone, how we can adapt this to the context of a plan. So don't blame him for this. So he never said that. He's showing you how, as part of a project, we do the financial and economic analysis. After that, based on examples in Rwanda, on his experience and yours as well, how we are going to try to see how we'll come about that in the case of a plan. So I believe that you are in a hurry. Just be patient, and when he will finish his presentation, well, you're going to tell him your difficulties. Please highlight your difficulties so that we can adapt in the context of the analyzing an investment plan composed of many projects. Go ahead, Sheriff. Mine is not a question, but I'd like to allow him to end his presentation, because there are many questions that could have been asked at the end. So just leave him, give him the freedom to finish his paper before we come in. Thank you. So we'll allow him to finish his paper, and then we'll break for lunch, and we come back. We are here for you. Thank you for being my advocate. Well, it is good. Well, it is better the way it is conducted, so in an interactive manner, because the issue of sampling will be one of the main problems that we'll face. But at the end of my presentation, I will address how we are going to open this project method to plan method or plan level. once again, I'm going to talk with a project, still with project. When we do that for a project, once we have conducted a financial analysis, we start with the financial analysis. We have 3 steps. The first step is to define the benefit that we expect. Secondly, we conduct the financial analysis. And thirdly, the economic analysis. Sorry, well, they must understand that what you are doing, they will come back to that. When they will finish their plan, when they will enter into the implementation step, they are going to develop projects. Take this into consideration because, well, in the implementation, they will come back to you. Yeah, I don't take this to be a threat. So the economic analysis, one of the steps of the economic analysis is, well, the one that I like less as economists is that we should try to convert the market price into economic values. I mean, so the shadow price, I mean, we consider that a market price include the distortions in the definition of market prices, reference prices, reference prices. So we need to convert some market prices into reference prices that really reflect the values of the cost and the benefit of the project. Well, I don't like these steps because sometimes it is too theoretical, but we need to talk about that. If there are big distortion, important tax, we need to take into account this by trying to withdraw this tax effect in price determination. So we need to put out some transfer. So we consider that the tax is not an economic value. This is just a redistribution for a country because don't forget that the economic analysis is for the country as a whole. If there is a tax imposed on a farmer for the government, it's just a transfer for the farmer to the government. So no, so this is why we should withdraw this element that the economists call distortion and tax in determining the prices. Theory, options. If you have several programs, we are going to calculate this VAN net value, and we'll choose the highest net value. So I put in bracket, well, in case this is not the only criteria, there are social criteria, food security criteria as well. They should not be the truth. This is just an estimate. It is an indicator which really provides you with some idea, but the other important criteria when talked about financial economic analysis is the internal profitability rate. I mean, this is the updating rate, which suggests that this net economic value will be zero. So if you have a profitability rate of 20%, it means that with an updating rate of 20%, we'll have a net annual rate of zero. So logically, the rate more the internal rate profitability rate is higher, more profitable is the investment in terms of cost and benefit ratio. So if well, this represents the interest rate, the maximal interest rate that the project can face without squandering the resources. Well, I mentioned the resources we're talking about. These should be monetary resources. We're not necessarily talking about resources like environment, other resources that that are not included in the internal profitability rate. So this is one indicator only. Well, in the investment plans, there is a distribution, a table showing the funding sources. These include the government, the technical and financial partners, the private sector, local government. So my question is no. And in terms of CFA, if we should show if a government invests 1 CFA francs, does it have the same value as the franc invested by a local community? Well, depending on the activity. Well, let us say the same value. Well, I don't know. I don't know if the NIPE, FNS only include public investment or private investments as well. Does it include private investments? Anyway, in terms of CFA francs, they will have the same value. Now, in terms of return on investment, I believe, well, as Madam was saying, for the government, it is the concern is social development, and so the profitability is likely to be lower. For investor, the investor will take the risk to invest only if he's sure to have a return on investment, higher return. But once again, this can be calculated. So I'm not going to get into details. I just want to show what does a recap table of the financial and economic analysis look like. So we show the various benefit that is expected of the various interventions. So conservation of soils and waters, on agric production, on water management in terms of lots, pumping, husbandry, and so on and so forth. So from year after year, we try to show all the benefits, try to calculate the benefits. So we make the total, and beneath the total and the benefit, we have summarized investment to cost of the project, the total investment costs, and the cost, the recurring cost, which are there. So this is the total cost. We have the total benefit, the total cost. We have made the difference between the two, and on this on this series, time-bound series. So we stop in year 8, but we can go up to year 20 or 25. We calculate the profitability rate on all this series. At the beginning, it is negative and becomes positive and increases. So here we have a profitable rate of 16.8%, and present annual value of $12 million, close to $13 million. So then maybe I'll move faster because I believe in the economic analysis at country level we should also introduce some elements of in terms of food and nutritional safety. Particularly, it is interesting not only to get interested to focus on the CFA or dollar side, but at quantitative level in terms of agricultural production. If we consider that in the implementation of NIPE, and a country will increase the production of sorghum or nutritional product by so and so, we can compare this at country level, compare this with the import. And so this is a useful consideration. What is also key is to find out, FAO distinguished 10 groups of commodities from nutritional point of view. We have cereals, tubers, dairy products, so each of them have the importance for human nutrition. It is therefore interesting as part of an economic analysis to quantify the contribution of NIPE to the production of food in these 10 groups. So this is one element that can be introduced as well. So with the nutritional composition of this product, we can try to compare at national level what was produced and compare it with the deficit or what we call dietary habit. There are countries that have guidelines in terms of dual consumption in order to have a good nutrition. We can compare the increase of production with this. We can also make focus of using the food products. Solange was mentioning consumption in relation to processing and exports. We can also deduce some measures to improve the dietary the diet in terms of nutritional quality. We can at country level as well, and this is aligned with the SDG 2. 2 is another SDG. So we can quantify at a national level the reduction of losses and food. Last year I was in Rome. I was in a panel of economists. So one of the questions asked them is, you as economists, what are the challenges that you face when you conduct financial and economic analysis? And I register what the answers. And the first challenge that they all mentioned is the availability of information. All the economists that we kind of analysis to the data that we have. It is useless to do plans or to do difficult models if there's no data to support them. So we need to adapt the ambition of. And I also believe that each country should adapt its own analysis. So we use data, secondary data in general, in the literature. We also use sometimes when you do a project. The techniques of lazy economists is try to mimic what another project did. I consider that the main element is, to interview people, to interview farmers, station agents, or people in the ministries, and so on and so forth, entrepreneurs. So the other challenge is to build realistic models in order to so that the financial analysis be useful. I mean, the financial analysis is useful if it can really provide advice to investors and farmers. If we lack data and do things artificially, it will not be useful. So one of the challenges is to have models that are more or less a reflection of the reality. One of the challenge, and it is interesting to know that 2 or 3 economists were saying that, they were mentioning that the financial analysis should be a reflection of the change theory of the investment project. So it is considered that if we do this, this will happen, and the financial analysis should reflect that for it to be useful. It should not be there should not be any disconnect from the result framework. Another challenge is maybe this is not the case here, but generally, the economist is asked to do the analysis meanwhile while the activities were not finalized, and it is difficult challenges for him there. So what I was mentioning, which for me is a brainstormer, is a convention between financial price and economic price. Well, as part of an IPE, we should streamline this step and to have a conversion rate that are standard used by the World Bank or other institutions. And sometimes one of the constraints is, and this really address the question, what do we do if the project is not profitable? Well, sometimes one of the economic challenges is that when the economist is asked to do pleasure to the World Bank and to have a profitability rate of 15 or 20%. This way, everybody is happy. This is a challenge. So, but if such a case, if an intervention is not profitable, the economist should say it. And this is not always easy, be it in the Ministry of Finance, be it in the Ministry of Agric or at the World Bank. Now, I don't know if you have questions. I would like to mention the resources that we have that can help you in the weeks ahead. Maybe to conduct the financial and economic analysis, I would like to remind you that, until recently, the baseline document that we used, even by us economists, was a book of Gittinger that was written in the 80s, suggesting that, it is not quite recent, and therefore there was need to feel at the level of IFAD, the World Bank, to update these tools. At the FAO, at the Investment Center of FAO, we developed in the past 3 years what we have, the investment learning platform, So I visualize it here. If you visit the site, you'll find this graph, which unfortunately has not been translated into French. Sorry for that. Where you see the investment cycle in 4 steps, the plan more globally. This is what we are doing now, and the investment design, the more specific investment project, and the implementation, the monitoring, and the evaluation, the capitalization, and returning back to the plan. On the learning platform, so there are many resources. So to try to explain the various steps of from the preparation, monitoring. There is a section on financial and economic analysis, and a special section on the inclusion of nutrition and the mainstreaming of inclusion on the development of investment programs. You have Rural Invest, which is a tool developed by FAO in recent years. I don't know if IGLE participated in Rural Invest trainings. If so, you can say a word on that. Rural Invest.
Is a very interesting tool and methodology.
C'est une méthodologie qui est composée de 3 modules. Mais ce qui est important, c'est qu'il sert à développer les plans d'investissement pour les investissements, les petits.
I can I think it can also be adapted to these plans, the lives. It has 3 modules. The first one is very participatory. It's a consultation process, and you decide the needs of what needs to be put in the investment plan. And then there is a second module, which is more to prepare some project profiles. It's not very detailed, but they can already give you an idea whether it's rentable or not. And a third module, which is on preparing full projects. The good thing of Invest is that you can have harmonized and centralized investments. So they all follow the same patterns and procedures, and so you can also use Rural Invest as a monitoring tool once you go into the implementation phase. FAO can provide training on these 3 modules and training material and software as well, and organize a mission for capacity development in the country. We have some brochure to share, no?
Oui, tu as raison de préciser.
Applications to consult and some brochures where you can find addresses to go and consult this thing. Yeah, Rural Invest is interesting. From the onset, the goal was to assist decision making at the micro level, at the level of the communities and some enterprises. But there are some tools that can be useful at macro level as well. And the last is the guidelines of IFAD. Recently, IFAD decided because IFAD decided to develop its own guidelines in partnership with FAO, in partnership with the Investment Center of FAO. So they developed Volume 1 and Volume 3. So don't ask me why Volume 2 is not issued. Well, it is ready from the past 2 years now, but it is yet to be published. Volume 1 include the basic concepts. It is a very slim document of about 40 pages, two slides that were taken from this document. And the document 3, I will mention that in the next page. It is this one. I brought one example, one copy that I can give to ECOWAS. This is a compendium of case studies to be consulted on the internet. This is a compendium of case studies. So concretely, we have about 10 case studies that I mentioned here. Agriculture, climate-sensitive agriculture, rural road, rural finance, irrigation, and so on and so forth. That can be useful. This is the Investment Center of FAO that prepared that for IFAD, based on the funding from IFAD, in order to have, to have a clear understanding of the methodology used for such projects. Previously, also, I want to say that the World Bank made an internal note which is not detailed enough, which is not specific to the agri sector. So I believe that the main resources today, the two main resources today are the learning platform and the internal IFAD guidelines. Now, I'd like to talk about the connection between the financial and economic analysis and monitoring and evaluation, because I believe that a way of maintaining the NIPES is that they should be implemented, and then because we need to have a good monitoring system for the economic and financial analysis to help implementing a good system, a good monitoring and evaluation system. So if we have a good result framework, it is much easier to have a good financial and economic analysis. So what will contribute toward a good result framework? We need to clarify the result expected, the outcomes expected. So I propose that from tomorrow, when we work in breakout sessions, one of the first steps is to to clarify specifically, to specify explicitly the various types of benefits we expect, benefit that can be monetized and others that can be quantified, and the intangible profit for those who can be quantified. So this connect to the monitoring, and therefore we need to have indicators that will be specific in terms of time or smart indicators that should be smart, and we have quantifiable target with a timeline. If in this outcome framework we have this element, specific element, then we will have, we'll use them directly to build the economic and financial analysis. So that's it. The economic and financial analysis should reflect the theory change of the project that will be used later on in monitoring and evaluation. So this is what I was saying. The fact of having a good monitoring evaluation system allows the NIPE to be implemented. I don't know what is the type of arrangement at ECOWAS level, but I believe that it is useful to have a reporting system each year to have, to say that we anticipated to mobilize so and so resources. So then this enables to keep the NIPE alive. We can only do that if we have a good monitoring system in place. The financial and economic analysis is served as basis for the monitoring of costs. When we do the financial and economic analysis, we do forecast. We envision intervention of projects. So we have a phasing calendar of investment costs. The first for specifying this in the financial economics analysis, this can be used for the monitoring and to know what was mobilized, what was spent in relation to what was anticipated, and allows to identify any gap, any additional funding needs. And it is also a way to have a good financial economic analysis by envisioning the benefit, at least in the first 5 years, and allow to monitor if these benefits are materialized in the farms, and if appropriate, make adjustment and NIPE implementation. This is an example of connection between the outcome framework and the NIPE. So the NIPE, the outcome framework here on the left, as part of this project, we have 3 components: promotion of value chains, support to farmers under the form of varieties and new varieties and irrigation. And here we have the project management unit. From there, we will derive the cost. Generally, the costs are expressed per component. Here we have component 1, which costs so and so, component 2 costing so and so, component 3 as well, and expected benefit, the expected impact. And here, the main goal at project level is to increase the yield by of 29,000 families. This will be used to build the financial analysis in a dynamic way, and in each of the main components, the 2 main components, we have assessed benefits that are at the lowest level, and here, we connect the 29,000 families to the value chains. This is a benefit, tangible benefit, but which is not monetarized, and that too, one of the performance indicators is the loans granted to families, and the second component, which is the support to the households, which therefore we have an increase of the yield by 4% of 2,000 hectare irrigated and 80,000 kilometer rural roads. This will help to develop financial models and the economic analysis proper. Now, I would like to, that is the last step, and except if you have any questions before I move to the last step, which is the question asked to me